Welcome. I'm Erik Fleming, host of A Moment with Erik Fleming, the podcast of our time. I want to personally thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then I need you to do a few things. First, I need subscribers. I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/A Moment with Erik Fleming. Your subscription allows an independent podcaster like me the freedom to speak truth to power and to expand and improve the show. Second, leave a 5-star review for the podcast on the streaming service you listen to it. That will help the podcast tremendously. Third, go to the website, momenterik.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, leave reviews and comments, listen to past episodes, and even learn a little bit about your host. Lastly, don't keep this a secret like it's your own personal guilty pleasure. Tell someone else about the podcast. Encourage others to listen to the podcast and share the podcast on your social media platforms because it is time to make this moment a movement. Thanks in advance for supporting the podcast of our time. I hope you enjoyed this episode as well.
The following program is hosted by the NVG Podcast Network.
Hello, and welcome to another Moment with Erik Fleming. I am your host, Erik Fleming. And today, 3 guests on. So yes, it's another jam-packed show, but these 3 young ladies that are coming on are optimists, but they're pragmatic optimists, right? And, that can apply to anybody that does the work that is needed in this day and age and this time in America. But I felt that was appropriate title for this program because one is an executive director for a political party. One is an executive director for a nonprofit that helps survivors of crimes. And then one is veteran warrior who now is in the mission of helping all nonprofits get better, but was one of the most outspoken leaders in activism at one point for a decade, actually. And so it's just an honor to have all 3 of them come on and all of them, talk about hope and talk about what can be done and why they're excited to do the work, but they're also very realistic about the times that we are in. And so pragmatic optimism seemed like an appropriate title for them. It's not necessarily sexy, but it is what it is. And I think that's kind of where we are because we can all be hopeful. But I think we have to be realistic in knowing that where we are now, there are some people that are ready to lead and that are leading. And then there's some people that we need to move out the way. So my guests are people that we need to elevate and highlight. And so I'm glad that they came on and hopefully you'll enjoy the interviews. I'm still encouraging people to subscribe. Go to patreon.com/A Moment with Erik Fleming, or you can go to momenterik.com and do the same thing. And also, just kind of catch up, learn about the show, learn about me, catch up on what's going on with the podcast. I have some sad news for my ego. The nominees came out for the Black Podcasting Awards. Yours truly was not one of the nominees this year. But nevertheless, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And I am going to continue to encourage people to support the Black Podcasting Awards because the nominees are pretty cool. One of the nominees was a nominee with me last year. And so hopefully the second time is the charm for that show. But in all seriousness, go to the Black Podcasters Awards website, check out the different shows that have been nominated, and then listen to them and support them any way you can. There are so many genres that are out there now. And it's hard to believe 5 years ago it was, it was just a thought. And so, we'll keep plugging along and hopefully we'll be distinguished as an award winner one day. But right now, I'm just honored that I have good listeners like you, and we're going to continue to do the work and continue to be a voice out here, especially in this day and age. Right. So anyway, enough about me and enough about all this other stuff. Let's go ahead and kick this show off. And as always, we kick it off with a moment of news with Grace G.
Thanks, Erik. A shooter killed 2 people and wounded 1 at a Dallas Immigration and Customs Enforcement office before taking his own life. The threat of a government shutdown increased after the Senate rejected a short-term spending bill passed by the House. Disney brought back Jimmy Kimmel Live to the air 6 days after suspending the show due to comments its host made about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Family and friends of the late conservative activist Charlie Kirk praised his life and legacy at a memorial service. Former NFL player Colin Kaepernick has pledged to fund a second independent autopsy for Demartravian Reed, a Delta State University student whose death was ruled a suicide. Ryan Ruth was found guilty of the attempted assassination of President Trump after pointing a rifle at him while he was golfing. A federal judge dismissed President Trump's $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times. A top prosecutor investigating New York Attorney General Letitia James resigned after President Trump publicly called for his removal. The U.S. Senate confirmed Donald Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Waltz, as the U.S. ambassador for the UN. The Trump administration announced a new proposal that would require companies to pay $100,000 per year for H-1B visas. President Trump announced that the Republican Party plans to hold a convention for the 2026 midterm elections. The city of Boston has paid a $150,000 settlement to 2 black men, Alan Swanson and Willie Bennett, who were wrongly accused of the 1989 murder of a pregnant woman. Egyptian-British activist Alaa Abdel Fattah was released a day after being pardoned by Egypt's president. And Priscilla Williams Till, a cousin of Emmett Till, is running for the U.S. Senate in Mississippi. I am Grace G., and this has been a Moment of News.
All right. Thank you, Grace, for that moment of news. And now it's time for my guest, Mikel Bolden. Hailing from Columbia, Mississippi, which is in Marion County, Mississippi, home of Walter Payton, but I digress. Mikel Bolden, daughter of Delois Taylor and Michael Taylor, was raised by her mother and her bonus father, Donald Mitchell. Mikel is the proud graduate of Tougaloo College, where she earned a bachelor's degree in political science. She also holds a master's in criminology and justice services from Jackson State University. Mikel is the mother of 2 children, Penelope Bolden and Timothy Bolden Jr., and the youngest of 6 siblings. She is a proud member of the Jackson, Mississippi alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the Order of Eastern Star Armentine Chapter Number 7. A 2-time self-published author, Mikel has written Live Freely, Laugh Often, Love Always, but Live Truthfully, and The Roots of Her. She is also the founder of The Humble Change, Inc., an organization dedicated to empowering Mississippi's youth with the resources, mentorship, and opportunities they need to thrive as students and future entrepreneurs. Throughout her career, Mikel has been a relentless advocate for civic engagement, voting rights, and voter protection. She has worked to establish initiatives that safeguard fair and accessible elections across Mississippi. Her passion for service extends beyond advocacy. She is known for her commitment to helping anyone she can, strengthening families, and building a more connected, empowered community. In her role as executive director of the Mississippi Democratic Party, Mikel is committed to moving Mississippi forward by prioritizing equity, education, and civic participation. Her leadership is rooted in her belief that investing in people, especially children in marginalized communities, creates a stronger, more vibrant Mississippi. Her personal motto is, "Life is a series of beginnings, not endings." She firmly believes that every challenge is an opportunity to fight harder, dream bigger, and keep moving forward. When she is not working, Mikel enjoys writing, reading, and strategizing while listening to music, always looking for the next way to inspire and uplift those around her. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Mikel Bolden. All right, Mikel Bolden. How you doing, ma'am? You doing good?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing fine. It's always good to talk to somebody from Mississippi.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I got a lot of good memories in Mississippi, and even more so because you are the executive director of the Democratic Party in Mississippi.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time at the old address, I guess, because y'all not on Congress Street anymore.
No, not on Congress Street anymore. We were on Fortification, but right now we're about to relocate to somewhere downtown. We're in the midst of 2 different locations right now. So
Okay. Well, I spent a lot of times at the house over there on Congress Street. All right, so let's go ahead and get this started. How I normally do this is that I throw out a quote as far as for an initial icebreaker. So your quote is, "In order for us to make a move and turn Mississippi blue, it's going to take everybody, and we cannot leave any corner of Mississippi untouched." Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So essentially, one thing about Mississippi, you have people who are misinformed, who may not even have the general information when it comes down to elections. Like right now, we have special elections. You have young leaders who are untouched when it comes to politics. You have community members who have lost trust when it comes to elected officials and just the overall process when it comes to voting. So making sure that you're meeting people where they are and having those real life conversations and not like over talking them saying, hey, well, you need to get out and vote and, not giving them context of what they're voting on. Like most people don't know who controls what. So right now, just had a talk with 2 different classes yesterday, and I spoke to them about the special election and how, hey, if you care about your health care benefits, if you care about jobs, if you care about, XYZ, you have a chance to voice your opinion when it comes to this election because there's a Senate and House races that are happening and they are in control of these things. So really breaking down that information of who controls what, breaking down the information of what office actually is in control of, if it's something that's happening in their school or if it's something, that's happening around the community, telling them where to go to get these resources. So making sure that people understand how to navigate their issues and say, well, I reached out to someone and they didn't contact. Well, you didn't reach out to the correct person. Let me steer you in the right direction. So that's really what I mean when, not leaving any corner untouched. We know we do have disenfranchised crimes that happen and where people have lost their rights to vote. But there are also some crimes that, I'll say charges that people have that they believe that they're unable to register to vote when that's not the case. They're just misinformed on how that process works and what it should look like. So, just really making sure everyone is knowledgeable about things and, asking those questions, having the real life conversation with community and college students. So,
Yeah. You brought up the disenfranchisement. One of my highlights is that I was able to get 3 human beings their right to vote back when I was in the legislature. And I know Sakia Summers, and excuse me, and I'm not just saying that because she's a former coworker of mine, but I know that's been an issue for her. And I really hope that Mississippi eventually gets to a point where we don't have to do that for individuals.
Yeah.
That, and we could get into a whole show about the whole process of that. And people have listened to
I
the
would say
show.
just that alone.
Yeah. Then the other thing, before I get to the other icebreaker, I know there's the Senate special election that's to replace John Horn, who got elected mayor of Jackson. Where's the House election?
So it's a new district from the redistricting case. You have House District 22, and that area, it covers Chickasaw, Monroe, and Clay County. And then you have some more special elections that's happening in DeSoto County. So for John Horn's seat, along with Senator Jordan with the Senate District 24, and then you also have House District 26, Orlando Payton's seat. Those were due to vacancies. So people are like, well, what are these special elections? What do they mean? Well, you have 3 that are due to vacancies, but you have another slew, there's like 14 races that are due to redistricting cases where they have expanded some of these districts and where they also have like included new districts. So during that time, you're letting people know like, hey, please get out and vote. It is very important because these new districts were drawn to expand the Black votership within each county. So to make sure that we are aware, we're making sure people are knowledgeable of like, hey, where you're in this county, some people are in the same county voting in 2 separate districts, like Senate District 2, Senate District 11, Senate District 19. They're all in the DeSoto County area, but they're all in different parts. You have Senate District 45, that's a new district that's enforced in Lamar County. So just making sure people are knowledgeable of what's going on right now. I've been talking about this since, they actually just made the decision on these races. It was like late May, around May-ish. And from that time on, it's like, hey guys, these special elections going on. Make sure you're aware. We had qualifying time, which was going into June. So, just making sure people are aware of what's going on right now because it does affect, their community.
All right. So now the second icebreaker is called 20 questions. So
Okay.
I need you to give me a number between 1 and 20.
13.
All right. Do you think there is such a thing as unbiased news or media, and why?
Unbiased news and media. I'm going to say no. I'm going to go on a limb and say no, primarily because, news reporters, they do, and it's nothing, not to slight anyone that does their job. But when it comes down to the unbiased portion of it, sometimes people are reading this information, they're confused about what's going on. It's not really an unbiased opinion. It's more so a strong leading opinion that leads into giving you more information a little bit later on. So it's never really unbiased. It's more so, well, hey, this is what we would like to cover, but we also want to throw in this information to make sure you know about it without giving, more context. So I don't think, news is really unbiased when it comes down to it because people still leave kind of confused on, what's really going on. If you leave people in question, it's not an unbiased opinion because, if you have an unbiased opinion, it's very clear cut and, of what it is.
Yeah. All right. So, Ms. Bolden, why did you get into politics?
Okay. Well, I've always kind of been into politics. I've been kind of behind the scenes, started out my career doing paralegal work. And I started having these conversations with my own family where they were kind of like untapped into what was really going on. And because like, maybe I'm just a person that likes research or, things like that. That is my major for one. So after I started having those conversations back in 2023, before the gubernatorial race, I started working with the Mississippi Democratic Party. And so from there, you start learning that you would believe that people are aware of situations and policies as well as how to properly advocate, just general information. But I came to learn very quickly that that wasn't true. While being at the Mississippi Democratic Party, I started doing field organizing works where I was going around doing regional meetings, just making people aware of who the candidates were. From there, I left the party and built the election protection program for Mississippi Votes, which is a nonpartisan organization here. And while doing that work, like I started like realizing, how sometimes, you step away from something and it's something you're supposed to be doing, but you're ignoring it. And that's really kind of like the light bulb that has kind of kept me here. So while doing the election protection program before DNC happened last year, 2024, I was asked to come in and be the executive director as the old executive director was stepping out. And I took some time to think about it, but it's like, no matter how many times I try to like steer myself away from it because politics can be very strenuous sometimes and it's a lot, especially in Mississippi where it's so much voter suppression, where democracy is not fair, fairness and equality seems to not exist sometimes. But I knew that I have the ability to speak to people and have them to understand certain things, guide them in the correct direction. So that's really what kept me here, along with like, I just love strategizing for one, and I like numbers and I like defeating the odds. And I feel like at some point in time, don't know when, but I'm speaking on it. It will happen for Mississippi to, change the narrative of what voting actually looks like, as well as people's knowledge of the voting process and having more integrity in the system.
Okay. So earlier this year, Congressman Thompson said the political climate is the worst that he has seen. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I do. One thing about it, like I understand, people have their take on Republican and Democrats, but at the same token, when you see your respected elected officials being in session, like when it comes to legislature, they're in session and they're being disrespected by their counterparts. It's like, well, it kind of brings a little fright to the situation. Like, do we have control? You know, where is the justice when it comes down to if you're speaking to someone who's working and doing the same exact work for you, maybe on a, across the aisle, but you're not giving them any respect. We also saw, in Texas where they locked the representative in the chambers. And then just speaking on, Representative Summers was disrespected by the Speaker of the House, recently. There's just things like that. Like I've never seen that before. Like, don't get me wrong, even being in the background of things and then stepping up and now being a part of, kind of a part of a bigger cause now. It's like, in what way I've never seen really any of this before. And yes, we know it was bad, but it's like it's getting worse day by day. And it's like people are having so much confidence in doing the wrong things. And it kind of brings like a little scare when it comes to community because people are asking, like, what does this mean for us? If they're doing this to those who are respected elected officials, what would they do to us? And we're just community members, right? So I really do feel that wholeheartedly, and it's like we have to change and we have to give people more confidence and more safety net when it comes down to politics in general.
So you stated when you first started at the party that the party needed to unify its message and build a grassroots infrastructure from people ages 18 to 35. How has that been going?
So it's a work in progress. When I say work in progress, right now, just speaking to the young men and women, they're asking, well, why is it important for me to vote? It's not going to matter. The whole, my vote doesn't matter. And then I break it down to them like, hey, well, what's important to you right now? What policy? And they'll look at you strange, like, what is policy? Policy is something that's around us day to day when it comes to taxes, when it comes to you getting funding for school, when it comes to the clothes that you wear. Sometimes the taxes on that, right? Tariffs, when it comes to, job minimum wage. Like I break it all the way down and they're like, oh, well, that is important to me. My health care, it is important to me. And I say, well, if that's important to you, here is how you can control it. You may, you're one vote. Yes, but you have a group of peers where you all will sit and talk about celebrities, but you won't talk about what's going on right here in front of you. And you have to, like, you explain it. I had a student yesterday. They knew exactly what was going on in the world and say, hey, I had a conversation with one of my buddies and they don't know what's going on. I said, but you understand it. Why didn't you explain it to them? Well, I don't know how. I said, well, it starts with the conversation. I said, sometimes you have to start with something that people understand and break it down into general terms for them. So right now it's going. I think it's more so the problem with 18 to 35 right now. It's an intergenerational gap where, like, between that age gap, people are very passionate about things. And then, when you go a little bit above, they're like, well, I've been where you are and you're gonna have to work and show me that you're meant to be here. But it's like at the same time, there are policies that are affecting them directly. Yes, there are policies that are affecting the older generation, but at the same time, you have, policies that are directly affecting them in this day of time and when they get to where you are. So it's really just trying to make sure they're invited to the table to have a conversation. Whenever I strategize, I normally, like, I have a nephew that's at college. I'll call him and be like, hey, like, what do you think about this? Like, I'm really trying to get a gist of where they are in their mind thinking, and then trying to make sure that everything that is done, they're somewhere along the line, they're included in that conversation, included in that strategy. And that has really been helping us. So more so talking with them versus talking to them and at them, it has helped a little bit more, is what I've learned.
Mm. What is the biggest challenge being the day-to-day leader of the Mississippi Democratic Party?
The day-to-day challenge would be having people trust the process. We all know politics has changed drastically over time. What that looks like when it comes down to whether or not you're doing field, whether or not you're talking about what's going on, that's changed. But having people trust the process of what that looks like now. Not a lot of older Democrats are trusting the digital process of politics. And I understand it. It's something new. Outside of that, it's also just making sure that whatever light is shined onto Democrats, it is a good, good light. I know everything is not going to be good. It's not going to be all rainbows and sunshine every day, but try to control the narrative. Is like, well, hey, you guys aren't doing this. And it's like, well, actually, we are. Here is what's happening. So being able to be a part of those conversations and break down realistically what's happening versus people saying, well, I feel like this is happening. This is what I read. It's kind of controlling the narrative and making sure you're correcting those things in real time versus, oh, well, I should have said this and, stuff like that. So I've had to be a part of conversations that, sometimes we want to take off the hat and I don't want to talk about this right now. But sometimes you have to, because not only does it save a person from, feeling security within voting, but it also gives them knowledge to pass along to the next person.
Yeah. All right. So have you or Chairman Taylor talked with the DNC Chair Martin about 2026 and how are the 2026 races shaping up?
Yeah, we've had conversations with DNC about it. I know Chairman Taylor has talked to Chairman Martin about 2026. Anytime we have conversations with DNC, I'm more so I talk to them about 2026 and 2027 as of right now. But so far, those elections, like, of course, they haven't qualified yet. We've had people to announce. We have some speculations of a couple more people may be announcing, but so far, we feel like it's going to be a good race. Of course, we have multiple Democrats that are running, so we don't get into it when it comes down to primaries, but we are in full support, making sure that, all of our candidates have the necessary resources that they need. One thing that we started this year between the campaign committee as well as, the party staff itself is candidate training, making sure that candidates have access to partners, resources, make sure they get endorsements, making sure they have the support when it comes down to the overall party, the county parties, and just any other partners that we have and dignitaries we have in Mississippi to make sure that they're getting all the, I guess you could say, confidence in them running their campaign. So that has been pretty much the conversation when it comes down to, of course, specials for this year, but 2026, and then looking forward into 2027 for those state races.
Yeah, and I know it's a challenge, you know. I just remember my interactions with the DNC back in the day there. And, it was a big deal when Howard Dean physically came to Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
He was that type of chair. And I don't think we really had a chair nationally that's committed to Mississippi like he was. Hopefully the new chairman will be that way. But I know
I believe he will.
Yeah. And I know that's just Mississippi gets ignored, bottom line. And I think,
Absolutely.
it's something that, I'm just one of those people who's like, if we've got 50 states, then we need to compete in all 50 states, especially in Mississippi. And
every time. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was just curious. And then I've been watching, I kind of always have a vested interest in the Senate race. And I see that Emmett Till's cousin has jumped in. I know Will Colom's son is running. But it kind of concerned me about Pickens because he was the nominee in 24, and now he's going to run as an independent. It's kind of, are y'all concerned about that? Or
I would say, we're concerned about all, oppositions and, people that are entering into the race. But I'd say, the thing is, I kind of hate that, he stepped away. Don't really know, I haven't personally had a conversation with them since probably like a month before that happened. So I can't really, speak on it. I won't say concern as in like, we don't know, but I know that one thing about it, people still view him as being a Democrat. So I'm looking at more so you're, of course, are going to have like split votes when it comes down to it. Because some people, they're not really understanding, like when they say independent, Democrat, Republican, they don't really think about things like that because when you have municipal races, everybody kind of runs as independent sometimes. This is the first year where we had a lot of Democratic municipal committees where people actually ran as Democrat, so just looking at that and just knowing the general community, not understanding the difference and not understanding where, strength may lie, I feel like it's going to be split votes.
Yeah. So since you brought it up, how did the party do in the municipal races this year?
Yeah, we did really good. So we had, of course, I really wish that we could have won the mayoral seat with Sonia Williams Barnes on the coast, but we had a lot of alderman, councilman seats that were filled. We flipped 7 mayoral seats. So I feel like it was really good in what we could do in the time that was given with the resources that we had. So, of course, it's going to get better, in time. But I feel like we had a very good election during municipals. We fought very hard, definitely worked directly with partners to make sure that candidates were endorsed, make sure they had funding, make sure they had groundwork. And then on election day, we have this war room where we make sure we have attorneys all over the state where we're directly accessing and, troubleshooting things right when it happens. So I feel like we as the Democratic Party did a great job since I've been there, past 2 years, we've definitely been running an elite voter protection system on election day and kind of leading up to election day. So that has been like something that was different. And we were able to troubleshoot a lot of things that happens. Voter suppression happens on election day, probably more times than none. But giving voters that confidence to go back and vote, stay in line, hey, here's the correct code and statute for this. Don't let them, deter you or steer you away. So,
yeah. So how have you been able to network with your contemporaries in the southern states to strategize? Have y'all been like picking each other's brains to figure out how we can flip these southern states?
yeah, we definitely, I feel like southern states, we have this special bond that we know what's going on and we're trying to like, one, keep each other encouraged, two, just steer the course and like, hey, I've worked on this, we've come across this issue. What have you done to, work this out in your area? What works best? So I feel like we're constantly strategizing like around the clock to see what can we do better. Okay, this is happening. and this was the response. Do you feel like, I should have done this, a little bit more, kind of going back to the drawing board as see fit, as well as just getting that support from them during these election time. Like anytime something's going on, it's like, hey guys, when we had municipals, we had some of the southern states even step in and phone banking. Like that's what we're here for, to be a family network for one another. So we'll assist, we'll strategize. We, like I said, we go to the drawing board mostly daily because this is like an ongoing thing that never stops. So yeah.
Yeah. So way back in the dinosaur days when I ran statewide, you would look at the map and it was like the western side of the state was blue and then everything else was red. What kind of inroads has the party made going east?
So right now, for one, I'll say like we have kind of like going to one thing I can say for myself in particular. Like I look at data and see like where has these numbers, like in what point in time. Like of course we know people's turnout for presidential elections more so than any others. But when it comes down to like statewide races, when it comes down to, special elections, one, making sure people are aware of it. Two, making sure that we have some people on the ground, either door knocking, either showing up doing listening sessions, voter education forums, maybe even, going to a church and just giving a nonpartisan approach of like, hey, do you know this is going on right now? What's your viewpoint on it? We've also done some polling here recently where we've gotten feedback. Because I think the thing is more so than none, every area of Mississippi, Mississippi is really more blue than it is red. Some people are just afraid. I feel like some people are afraid to just really vote where they feel trust in because they just don't know. Mississippi is a personable state, so if they don't have any connection with you, they're going to vote the opposite way. And it's not anything against the candidate; it's just how Mississippi is ran in my eyes. And I know when you go to, of course, top of the state, middle of the state, to the bottom of the state, it's like three different climates, right? When it comes down to people and how they view things, but we just gotta, meet people where they are. We gotta understand what they view as being important in each community and see how we can better explain things, as well as have candidates, for one, better understand what's going on in the areas in which they are running.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the listeners, when Ms. Bolden talks about personable, it's like, you could have this fancy title. I'm the governor, I'm the treasurer, whatever. But in Mississippi, they either going to call you by your first name, your last name, whichever one fits the rhythm of the conversation, right? They not going to say, oh, well, Governor so-and-so. No, they're going to call you by your first name. So yeah, Mississippi is the Mississippians, when they get invested in somebody, they really think that the key is getting the vast majority of them invested. I know that's been always the challenge.
Yeah.
So at the end of your service to the party, whenever that is, what would you want your legacy to be?
I want my legacy to be that of trust, that of integrity when it comes down to the relationship between the party and the community. Making sure that anytime I leave from somewhere, I have left a mark of education, of a continuation of, passion about something, making sure that people are known of what's going on around them. So I would say more so just trust and integrity, rebuilding that. So I feel like that could be, something, as well as support to candidates, where candidates feel they can trust the party, where candidates feel like they can lean on the party to get assistance. That's really what I want my legacy to be, outside of candidates, community. So candidates and community, trust and integrity.
Well, I'm really impressed. It sounds like you actually thought about this. A lot of times I'll ask somebody a question like that and they got to stop for a minute and pause. You went right into it. So I'm really impressed that you put some thought into that. All right. So the last question I want to ask you is not about politics. I know you've been heavily involved in nonprofits. So quickly talk about the work that you do with nonprofits, especially ones that you've either started or you continue to work with?
Yeah. So I personally have my own nonprofit, The Humble Change, where working with youth when it comes to mentorship and career, making sure that youth have a place of belonging. So that is something that's very important to me. Now, when it comes down to advocacy and policy work and things of that nature, just making sure that I keep those relationships with nonpartisan groups. Like I said, I was working with Mississippi Votes, built their election protection program, just making sure that the integrity of Mississippi is looked at and made important. Because, like you said earlier, people overlook Mississippi, but sometimes it's the lack of knowing when it comes down to the people of Mississippi. They just don't know. I've changed a lot of people in mindsets just by having a conversation with them. So just more so keeping the connections, making sure that the partnerships are there when it comes down to election day, making sure that in whatever way we can assist them on election day and get those resources over to them, as well as maybe take over whatever their issue may be that they may not have, like, I wouldn't say the control over, but we may have like a little bit more push we can do. We take over that initiative and make sure that it's done. So just continuation of partnership and making sure that everybody understands what each organization is supposed to do. You have great groups that are here. You have One Voice. You have, of course, Mississippi Votes. You have Mississippi Engage. You have We Must Vote. You also have Black Women's Roundtable. Like making sure that all those connections are at the same table or at least a part of the conversation and are aware of what's going on all around Mississippi, so nobody's left out.
Yeah. All right. So, Mikel Bolden, I just want to thank you for coming on, but I really, really am glad that you are in the position you are in. It sounds like the party's in good hands with you running the day-to-day operations. And I like your optimism and I'll say pragmatic optimism, because I know you're dealing with stuff, but you seem to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's very, very important in Mississippi politics. If people want to get in touch with you, whether it's dealing with the party or whether dealing with your nonprofit work, how can they do that?
Yeah, so if they want to get in contact with me when it comes down to social medias, if you look up The Humble Change, that's Humble Change all together, you can find me there. Mikel Taylor is my name on Facebook. That's my maiden name, but you can contact me there. Just reach out. You type in Mikel, I'm pretty sure a social media is going to come up. I have a author page that's Blossoms Truth. So either of those pages, just type it in, look me up. If you look up Mississippi Democrats, you'll find me. So I'm here and willing to have whatever conversations, with people, not one to steer away from making connection to make sure that we have a better state. So I'm here.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on. I greatly appreciate it.
No problem. And thank you for your time, Mr. Fleming.
All right, guys. And we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right, and we are back. And so now it is time for my next guest, Renee Williams. Renee Williams is a dedicated advocate and leader in the field of victim services, currently serving as Chief Executive Officer of the National Center of Victims of Crime. With over 15 years of experience in the nonprofit and legal sectors, Renee has a proven track record of championing the rights and needs of victims of crime. Prior to her role at NCVC, Renee was the executive director of a legal services organization in Pittsburgh that focused on the legal rights of victims of domestic violence and other indigent clients. Renee is a sought-after speaker nationally, known for her dynamic presentations and ability to engage diverse audiences. She has represented NCVC on the NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, Court TV, HLN, and is a frequent guest on podcasts. She has been instrumental in shaping national conversations around victims' rights and has been a vocal advocate for changes to the justice system that better protect and support victims of crime. As the executive director of the NCVC, Renee continues to lead with integrity, compassion, and a commitment to making a difference in the lives of those affected by crime. Her vision and dedication have made her a respected figure in the victim services field, and she remains a tireless advocate for those whose voices often go unheard. Her passion for empowering survivors and creating a more and just compassionate society has been the driving force behind her career and reaches beyond her professional interests. She mentors through Big Brothers Big Sisters, advocates for children as a court-appointed special advocate, and as a weekly volunteer at Maryland Therapeutic Writing. For these efforts, she has been recognized as an Athena Young Professional Finalist, named one of Pittsburgh's 40 Under 40, and received the Jefferson Award. Renee holds a Juris Doctorate from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law and a bachelor's degree in theater arts from Point Park University. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Renee Williams. All right, Renee Williams. How you doing, ma'am? You doing good?
I'm good. It's Friday. It's sunny. I'm good to go. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's not as sunny here in Atlanta where I am, but it's still a good day. So I'm glad for that. And I'm really glad to have you come on. I think the work that you do is very, very important. As somebody that's been an elected official and somebody that's been in law enforcement, I think, advocates for people that have experienced crime is very important. And that seems to have been something that I think people took for granted, and we'll dive into that a little more, but it seems like some people took for granted for a lot of years. And then I'd say over the last 20 years or so, people have been like, hey, we might need to look out for the folks that have been victims or survivors of criminal activity. So I'm glad that you have ventured into that, and we'll dive into why you decided to do that. But before we get started, I do a couple of icebreakers. So the first icebreaker is a quote. Survivors deserve control over their own destinies, not the exploitation of their families and private lives to serve political goals. What does that quote mean to you?
First of all, who said that? That's brilliant.
I think you did.
Well, that's awkward. I'm a genius. I think that what I meant by that, and what that means to me, is that a lot of times you see in any politics, people will say they're tough on crime. They're not tough on crime. They stand for survivors, and they say it for clickbait, but they don't always know exactly what that means. And what we have found that means is actually walking with survivors to help them with what they need. Not all survivors want the same thing, and not all survivors want what some politicians put out there that they say they want. Survivors are not a monolith. They all have different feelings and opinions, and each survivor individually has the right to decide what path is going to get them to their point of healing. Yeah.
And don't feel bad. Not everybody recognizes their own genius when I do that quote icebreaker thing, but it's all good. And now the next icebreaker is what I call 20 questions. So I need you to give me a number between 1 and 20.
I'm looking for some guidance. The first number I see on my wall is 6.
Okay. Well, what do you think was the best thing the previous administration did?
I'm going to punt on that. On 12.
We say 12?
Yeah.
All right. What advice do you have for recognizing fake news, like propaganda, misinformation, disinformation?
I think you've got to do your own research on everything. I think that all social media has really led us down a path of just believing whatever we see. I fall into that quite a bit. Make sure you verify everything you hear.
Okay. All right. So how did you become an advocate for crime victims?
So there was victimization in my family. And I think whenever you speak to somebody in the crime victims field, this is what you find. There is a history of some type of victimization, whether it's a family member, whether it's themselves. So There was a history of victimization within my extended family that really impacted how I saw things as a child. I was then a victim of crime at the age of 19, which also impacted how I saw the world and viewed the world. And I went to law school after that and got the corporate job that everybody wants, that everybody longs for in law school, and realized that I just wasn't using my talents and my capability to the best of my abilities. I'm Christian, and there's a wonderful quote, "To whom much is given, much will be expected." And also, I trusted you with a little, so I will trust you with a lot. And I didn't think that I was living that out by being just a corporate lawyer that kind of filled a hole. So I started to look at how to best expand what I was doing. And I started actually at a small nonprofit in Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh, working on just domestic violence work and helping victims of domestic violence within their court proceedings. And it led to this.
Okay. So when you say this, you're talking about the National Center for Victims of Crime. What exactly is the National Center for Victims of Crime?
Well, we were founded in 1985, so we're celebrating our 40th anniversary. We were founded by a family whose mother was killed by her husband, and her children were very privileged and very wealthy and very poorly treated by both the justice system and the media. And they realized that if they went through that from their place of privilege, what a struggle an average everyday victim must have. And they wanted to make sure that there was some help. So they formed us. We started really as an advocacy group that pushed for a lot of the original victims' laws. And you're right, for a long time, it's just been within the past few decades that we've recognized that we need to give victims rights within the justice system. And so they recognized that. So we really pushed for VOCA and VAWA 40 years ago, which are two different forms of legislation that have really changed the landscape of victims' rights. Now we provide training and technical assistance to police officers, to judges, to lawyers, to anybody who helps someone in the justice system. We also help victims directly through our hotline, and we do a couple of other things just to make sure that we are trying our best to create a victim-centered ecosphere of the justice system. We've oddly gotten a little bit away from our roots. We don't do advocacy anymore. We don't do nearly, I wouldn't say not at all, but we really don't push for laws. We try to stay out of legislation and politics unless it's something that very much impacts and harms a victim.
Okay. Your organization survived the recent suspension of grants from the U.S. Department of Justice, except for one. How were you able to do that? And how will the lost grant impact your organization?
So we had originally 5 of our grants or sub-grants cut. We managed to convince them that 2 of our grants were very valuable. And we were able to do that because we were able to show our story and prove the 2 that were returned how truly valuable those were. One of the grants that had originally been cut that was restored within 24 hours was our hotline that provides 24/7 services to all victims of crime with no questions asked. So that was restored almost immediately, as was another grant that provides what we think are very valuable services. And we were able to get out there and explain why our programs were so valuable. And we were incredibly lucky that the Justice Department agreed with us. The other 3 grants, we've had to make some cuts. We've had to look at ways that we do business and make some changes. We did have to do layoffs of some of our staff members who were on those grants and were working specifically with those programs. So we did have to make those cuts.
Yeah. So it was 5 in total, and you were able to maintain 2, and then you lost.
Correct.
Okay. I thought it was just 3. I only saw 3 that got highlighted, but okay.
So two of when I say the 5, we were called sub-grants on. So we were working with somebody else, and that person lost their program, and therefore we got cut off as well.
I got you. Okay. Talk about your work toward helping fraud victims overcome shame and sadness.
So fraud victims are one of the last understood victim types in our kind of society now. We've gotten away from victim blaming in every single other type of crime except for fraud. And we still use victim blaming language like, how could you fall for this? So for victims of fraud, a lot of people think it's just money. You just lost money and it's your own fault. That's not actually true. A lot of times they are still having to interact with the world. So there is still a moment of fear when they have to interface with the world. They've also often lost a relationship. If it was a romance scam, they've lost someone that they genuinely believed cared about them. And a lot of times they're facing shame, both from people who are judging them and wondering how they could have fallen for something. And I use those words with air quotes, but also shame from their family. You know, a lot of times we see individuals who lose their entire life savings and what they really meant on to pass to their family. And they're so worried about how folks will react to that.
Yeah. Well, I went through that. It was like a fraud situation. Somebody got into my bank account and, you know, at first the bank was working with me and all that. And then I ended up losing the account anyway. And, you know, so I a lot of those emotions you talked about, I definitely was feeling that. It's like, how did I let that happen? You're trying to figure out what did you do wrong to get into that place. And then when you end up losing the account anyway, it's like, well, why even bother? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, so you help people kind of walk through those emotions and all that kind of stuff.
And I want to say with that, you know, and there's so many words we can call them: fraudsters, scam artists. I hate the term scam artists because it makes them seem like they're fancy in some way. Even fraudsters is a little too cutesy for me. I think we should call them perpetrators of fraud. But perpetrators have become so smart and so advanced, and there are really entire organizations that are built around scamming one person. And so that's what I think is very important for everybody to understand is we see this across the spectrum from education level, race, position in life. Anybody could become a victim of a scammer because they really have become incredibly sophisticated at what they say. There is a science they use to how to get into your mind and convince you that they are who they are. It's not your kind of grandmother's fraud of, let me give you a call and say it's a publisher's clearinghouse check. It's become much more advanced and sophisticated than that.
Yeah. And then is it the publisher's clearinghouse? I think they just, there's one guy that's waiting on his money and he never got it. They just shut down, and I hope he gets his money, but yeah, he's kind of like in the lurch. They said, well, we filed bankruptcy. It's like, and I was like, you still need to pay that debt. But yeah.
No, I will tell you, I met one young woman who has a master's degree in computer science and was a victim of an employment scam. So somebody texted her and said, we're looking for this type of position. We found your resume on Monster or some other site. I probably shouldn't call out certain sites, but we found your resume at this place. Are you still interested in a job? And, you know, she went in for an interview. There was a real interview. And next thing you know, she had given them her bank account information because she was hired and they wanted to put her on payroll. And it was all a sham. So incredibly educated people are becoming victims of scams as well. It has nothing to do with your intelligence or kind of, quote, falling for it.
Yeah. So I want to get back to this, a particular point we were discussing about the focus. Why do you think in the United States, I can't speak for any country, why do you think in the United States there's a stigma attached to people who are victims or survivors of crime?
Wait, I'm sorry. We broke up right at that moment. You froze. So could you repeat the question?
Oh, I was saying in the United States, why do you think that there's a stigma on people who are victims or survivors of crime?
I think it depends on the crime type, but I think it's deeply psychological. And I think that we believe that we ourselves as a human would, if it's a scam, not fall for something. If it is a sexual abuse case, not be in that position. I think that we desperately, somewhere deep in our psyche, want to believe that we could protect ourselves from something. And the bad things don't just happen if we do everything right. And I think that bleeds out into when we are looking at victims. And frankly, I think that that is why there's an obsession with true crime in the United States. We call it protective vigilantism. It's, why did this happen to somebody else? And why am I different? Why would this never happen to me because of how I live my life?
Yeah. I do think, that explains a lot of things that we do, like which neighborhoods we try to buy a house in or move into, schools that we choose for our children to go, all that kind of stuff. Thinking that, well, if we're in a certain spot, then we're not going to be exposed to crime as opposed to living in, the city or whatever. Right. And so now, do you think that your organization and others have done a good job in letting people know that, I guess for a better term, that it's not okay that you went through that, but it's not something to be ashamed of if you did?
I think we've done a lot of work on that. I think that it is the human condition to just naturally always wonder what you could have done differently and how to not be ashamed. And so we do work with folks on that. I think that really the field and the movement in the past 40 years has made huge strides in that area of people not victim blaming and of victims not blaming themselves. But I do think that that is always the human condition to kind of kick back to that instinctually. Like, what could I have done differently? I walk on a trail just about every day, and if something happened to me, what could I have done? Should I have carried a bigger thing of mace? Should I have brought my dog that day? We want to naturally break down a series of decisions to see what we could have changed.
Yeah. What about the trauma aspect of it? How do you help people get through trauma?
So a lot of times we have to figure out what they need first. So our hotline, again, we have victim assistance specialists who will help people process what they have been through. The first and most important part in any processing of trauma is ensuring that somebody feels safe. You cannot start to process trauma until you feel like you are in a safe place. So that is step one. And then after that, again, everybody needs something different. You can have a victim of a somewhat violent crime who says they're okay and genuinely believes they're okay and that they did not have trauma. And that's not usually true, but maybe it is. We process things so differently as individual humans that it's a really one-on-one, case-by-case basis when we are working with somebody.
Yeah. Why is court backlog devastating to victims of crime?
When something bad happens to you, your instinct is to want to move on. And so a lot of times, and we see this with civil cases as well, in the moment, you want to address the wrong that was done, and you want to make sure that this doesn't happen to somebody else. But as time drags on and you get further and further out from that traumatic event, you don't want to keep being reminded of it. So that's part one. But part two is a lot of times, the longer something drags out, the more victims and witnesses are subject to intimidation, retaliation, and threats. And so if there's not a quick prosecution, you're going to see victims and witnesses lose interest is the wrong word, but kind of lose steam and not want to be involved because they need that space.
So how does your organization help people deal with that?
Again, it's on a case by case. So our hotline workers will walk people through what the process is. They will try to provide emotional support to everything that's happening. We do try to work with prosecutors on moving cases along. So not directly helping victims, but actually helping the individuals that are moving these cases. And we look at best practices on how to make sure that the backlog is going as quickly as possible.
Is there a particular state or city or environment where you see those backlogs more? Or is it, I shouldn't say a state because you probably don't want to name a state, but is there a particular type of state or type of city where it's like, okay, well, we know there's going to be a situation we're going to have to help, and I'm sure you don't, if people reach out to you all, you don't go out and, like attorneys with billboards, you just, if people call, then you just deal with it as like you said, per case basis.
That's a great question. I honestly don't know because a lot of times we aren't looking at individuals on the front end. We're looking at them post that. And a lot of the information we're getting is post that. So that's somewhere that I'm not an expert in because we're helping victims and not necessarily the court process. So that's probably not the question for me to try to answer.
Okay, I got you. So as we're recording this, yesterday was the National Day of Remembrance for Murder Victims. How does your organization help commemorate that day annually?
Well, we do try to be respectful of that on social media. We will push things out. But I think when it comes to commemoration days, we don't necessarily do anything extra special because we know we're needed the other 364 days a year. So for us, every day is national commemoration of homicide victims because we are on the phone with those families. We are constantly trying to help them.
Yeah. Do you feel that we are getting to a point now where we're getting desensitized to things, being desensitized to crime, particular types of crime? Or do you think that we still have this incredible human element out here of compassion and your work is appreciated for what you're doing?
I think our work is appreciated. I think we still have the human element, but I think that I can think all of those things and also know for a fact that we are becoming grossly desensitized. And I think a lot of that isn't what most people think because a lot of people want to point to the mass shootings and all of that. It actually has its genesis in true crime as a genre. And we work with true crime creators. We do try to help them make victim-centered media. But in the past 10 years, we've seen such an explosion of true crime content. You could, if you chose, listen to a different true crime case for probably 4 weeks, 24/7, without a change and without the same case. There are podcasts, there are YouTube channels, there are however many Netflix, Hulu, ID Discovery, all have a true crime content creator. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I think that has started to very much desensitize us to homicide. It's also made us forget that the victims involved are people, not characters in a story. And we go to an event called CrimeCon every year, which is about, I think this year they had 9,000 attendees who are just obsessed with true crime, and they want to meet the victims' families and they want to meet the victims. And in a lot of ways, that's great. But we've noticed that there's I almost want to call it a veil where people view these very real people they're meeting like they're famous actors or characters in a story, and not that they've lived out the worst day of their life.
So when you participate in something like that, do you participate to kind of get people to drop that veil, or are you there on behalf of particular clients? How does that work?
No, so we don't have particular clients. We are there to try to make sure that people are consuming true crime ethically and are also producing true crime ethically. So we've released several guides in this, and a lot of it. So when we go, we have a booth and a table where people come and talk to us. But the producers of CrimeCon have actually been quite lovely to work with, and they always give me a few sessions to talk about true crime ethics. And so we try to emphasize that you should not be consuming true crime unless the victims or the victims' families themselves were actually interviewed, because if they were not interviewed, it probably means that they did not consent to their story being told again. So we push that. We also, yes, push the idea that these are people. And so you might be very curious about certain aspects of their life, but when you go to have this conversation with them, think about whether or not you'd be offended if somebody asked you that question. So we do a lot of things there. We have a lot of hope when we go because we have seen changes and we have seen, especially content creators, gear much more closely to being ethical, but there's still always work to be done.
All right. So I'll close out with this question. When it's all said and done, what would you want your legacy to be? What do you want to see accomplished with the work that you're doing, being an advocate for crime victims?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I would like to know that I personally moved the needle, even just a little bit, on true crime cases and on true crime ethics. And I would like to know that I helped as many families individually as I could personally. It's very hard in this space, in this field, and in this position to not kind of get lost in the failures. So when people call me and I can't help them, that's devastating to me, but it happens a lot. It happens more than the victories. And so it's easy to get lost in that sometimes. It's also easy to get lost in numbers. And so my ideal would be that I personally helped impact somebody's life, whether it's on a case, whether it's getting them the help they needed, as many individuals as I possibly can.
Well, Renee Williams, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. It's an honor to talk to you about, not only the work, but just talk to you as a person, because it seems as though that you're very committed to what you're doing, and to leave the cushy world of corporate law to dig in and to help people. That speaks volumes about your character. If people want to support the work that you're doing, if people want to get involved, how can they do that? And how can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. Victimsofcrime.org, and it's victims plural. So I'll say it again slowly. It's victimsofcrime.org. We are also on Instagram, which is crimevictimsorg, just one word. Reach out. If people want to donate, we always appreciate it. There's a donate button, but the starting place is really on our webpage to figure out where you fit in, whether it's a volunteer opportunity, whether assistance is needed. That's always the start place.
All right. Well, I know you're trying to enjoy your weekend, so I'm going to let you go, but I greatly appreciate you coming on and talking about the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time.
All right, guys, and we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right, and we are back. And so now it is time for our next guest, Joan Garry. Joan Garry is an internationally recognized champion for the nonprofit sector and a highly sought after executive coach for CEOs of some of the nation's largest organizations. An author, blogger, and founder of the Nonprofit Leadership Lab, Joan has helped hundreds of thousands of nonprofit board and staff leaders become 5-star managers, communicators, and the inspiring ambassadors their organization need and deserve. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Joan Garry. All right, Joan Garry, how you doing? You doing good?
I'm good. I'm good. The world is a little not so good, but we try to tackle, one day at a time and try to do one good thing at a time. And it's a pretty good antidote.
Yeah, well, it eventually will add up. But, I feel that you can't do much wrong because you have the same name as my mom. So I'm sure you're going to be okay.
When I was a kid, people used to say, oh, yeah, my mother's name is Joan. And my name didn't actually fit until I actually became a mother. And so now I'm somebody's mother named Joan.
Yeah, that's always interesting how we grow into our names. My biggest hang up was when I was running for office, and when I was running locally, that was one thing, but when I ran statewide, people thought I was a different color, when I was,
Oh,
because of the way I spell my name. And so when I
yeah.
showed up, they was like, "Oh, you're black." And it was like, yeah. So I understand how names can get.
I think it's good to keep people on their toes, don't you think?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So look, there's a couple of things I do to start off the podcast, the little icebreakers I do.
Sure.
So the first one is a quote. Being a nonprofit leader is actually a privilege and a joy. What does that quote mean to you?
Well, first of all, I think it's my quote, right?
That's correct.
So what it means for me, Erik, is, and it comes a little bit from my faith, if I'm being honest. I grew up Catholic, and I actually am now a Jew by choice. And there is a phrase in Judaism called tikkun olam, which means to repair the world. And nonprofit work in the nonprofit space for me is about repairing the world. And for Jews, that's why we're here. We're here to repair the world. And to be able to do that in a professional capacity feels like a real joy. And to serve people, to be able to advocate for them, to be able to provide them with beautiful music, to help ensure their rights, that just feels like a privilege to me. And so that's how I think about nonprofit service as both a joy and a privilege.
Okay. Now, the next icebreaker is what we call 20 questions. So
Are there 20 of them?
No. There's 20 of them to choose from, but you choose by giving me a number.
Okay, I'm going to go with number 6.
Okay. What do you think was the worst or best thing the previous administration did? When I say previous, I'm talking about the Biden administration.
I have to do one or the other?
Yeah, well, whichever one you feel.
Well,
if you want to do both. That's fine.
It's an icebreaker, so maybe I can be a little flexible here. Because I ran a gay rights organization for 10 years, I can say that the Biden administration was probably one of the most LGBT friendly, that made the most good things happen for the LGBT community. On the flip side, I probably won't be the first person that answers this way. I voted for Joe Biden because I saw him as a transitional president that was going to make room for new leaders, and his cabinet showed me that when he named his cabinet. I saw young, I saw diverse, I saw skilled, and I thought that his decision to run for a second term, as he sort of, in my mind, broke that promise to me as a voter, separate and apart from whatever happened to him during the second administration. So I feel like he was an ideal transitional president who got us back on track after the pandemic, brought in a bunch of new diverse leaders to serve on his cabinet and in his administration. And that was his job, to put us back on our feet and pass the baton to a new generation.
Yeah. So you mentioned your work, and for the listening audience, Ms. Garry was the executive director of GLAAD for 10 years, which is one of the most preeminent LGBTQ organizations in the country. How did you start your journey into the nonprofit sector? Because GLAAD is a nonprofit, but you were doing other work before then. So how did you get into nonprofit work?
So I bet when you ask questions like this, you get the same sort of conceptual response, which is that career paths are very rarely linear, right? And mine certainly was not. Prior to joining GLAAD, I was a successful media executive. I was part of the management team that launched MTV, and I worked at Showtime for many years. But then, like many, many people out there, something remarkable happened to me. I became a parent and fit my name, Joan. And I actually believe that the moment you become a parent, you actually become an advocate, advocating for them every step of the way. And I think this was especially true for same-sex couples, and was especially true in a pre-marriage equality world. You want to do what you can to ensure the world treats your kids well. And without marriage equality, our kids were not legally connected to me. Because although we planned our kids together, my wife did all the birthing, I did all the catching. I got the easier job. But I was a legal stranger. And so as a result, we filed they say the personal is political. I filed a personal lawsuit and won a case to become the first woman in the state of New Jersey to legally adopt my partner's biological kids, or as I like to say, to adopt my own children. And our kids became the first kids in the state of New Jersey to legally have two moms, whether they liked it or not. And this was maybe call it a cliched pivotal moment that one person can make a difference. I saw it on the headlines of the, New York Times and the Bergen Record and all these newspapers. And here I was thinking I had done something to protect my family, when in fact what I had done was thrown a pebble in the pond that was going to make it possible for many, many families to be protected. And it really was a kind of catalyst or kindling for me to ignite my interest in crossing the bridge from the for-profit sector to the nonprofit sector. And because GLAAD is an organization that works with and through the media to tell the lives of LGBT families fairly and accurately, I felt like from the private sector, I brought some really interesting expertise, and I got the opportunity to be what I like to refer to as a professional lesbian.
Well, when you said that about becoming a parent, I think it was a little different for me. I was always an activist.
How so?
Well, I was always an activist, and then I became elected. So,
oh yeah.
So once I became a parent, once I was elected. I mean, well, that's not exactly true. I inherited two boys through the marriage, but it was like to have my own biological child. That was when I was elected. And so I think what it did do though was it made it more real, right? And it's like, so when I said I'm fighting for our children, it was like, oh yeah, I've got children.
Oh yeah, you are.
Yeah. So I mean, I think,
yeah,
but I get what you're saying, because a lot of people, have that experience. It's like life hits them real when it's like there's another generation. As one comedian likes to say, I've created another person. And so now I've got to take things a little different.
I also think too, real quick, that, when I was at Showtime, we launched a pay-per-view business there. And during the end of my tenure there, I was managing the joint venture between Showtime and Don King Productions, and spent far too much time at the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas watching fights, which was kind of like not my jam. And there also comes a point in your own career where you think to yourself, I have really interesting skills and expertise, and I really could put them to better use. And so I think it was those things melding together.
Yeah, I got you. Why are nonprofits messy?
So that is the name of my podcast, Nonprofits Are Messy. And I don't mean it as a pejorative. What I mean is that when I came into the field, I was an executive director. I was supposedly in charge. I reported to a board. So I reported to a bunch of volunteers most of whom had never had my job. Right? In corporate America, you usually get promoted and you have the job your boss had or something like that, right? So I'm reporting to a bunch of volunteers. I am beholden to a vast number of stakeholders in a very different way. And I don't think of it as hierarchical. I think of it as the sort of the power coming from all around you, from your board, your volunteers, your donors, your staff, and that you are sort of the conductor, the centerpiece. And because of all of those different voices, it gets particularly messy because you actually have to honor those voices because they are interested stakeholders. And there's some of this as an elected. You have to honor these while also being true to the sort of clear compass and direction that your mission sets you on. And so you have to be sort of really true to that while incorporating the voices and feelings and opinions of the folks you represent, the folks who have invested in your organization and the people who provide oversight to your organization, who usually have day jobs.
Right.
So it's a very odd model, but I will just say that I think that there are treasures in that mess from if you are a good facilitator conductor, and you can really find them, and decisions can be richer for the result.
Well, as someone who has been a chairman of a board, a nonprofit board, and as an executive director of a nonprofit, I can relate on both sides of what you're saying. And, coming in and saying, okay, well, we want to do this, and anybody got ideas, and, and then as the executive director, it's like, I got to walk these people through all this stuff. Okay, let's see if they can catch on and all that stuff. And a lot of times you get frustrated as if you're on the ED side, because it's like, well, they're not catching the vision and all that stuff. And it's like, okay, well, if this is what they want, then we got to do it that way. And then as the chair, you're trying to herd all the cats in, including the executive director, to make sure that everybody's got the same vision. So
bingo.
I relate when I saw that was the name of your podcast. I totally related right away. I didn't even have to listen to any of it. I knew exactly where you were going with that. All right. So if you had to give a State of the Union type address concerning nonprofits in the United States, what would that sound like?
Oh my gosh, that is like the best question I have ever been asked. And you provided that to me ahead of time, and I really appreciate it, because I wouldn't have wanted to answer it on the fly. So I think it would go something along these lines. Erik, I want you to imagine taking a stroll through your town or your city, and imagine it without a museum or a chorus, a Y, synagogue, a hospital, a college, a food pantry, an animal rescue organization, or a chamber of commerce. And you could just add to that list. It would be really hard to imagine. And it is these vital organizations that, in my mind, turn towns into communities, that turn residents into neighbors. And I see the nonprofit sector as an engine of hope and an engine that drives our common humanity. 1.9 million of these organizations are here in the United States alone, and well over 60 million people engage with nonprofits every single year. It's a huge driver of our economy and our workforce. Nonprofits contribute $1.4 million to the economy, and it is the third largest driver of our workforce behind retail, food, and service. So 12.7 million people work in nonprofit sector every year. And I believe that precious few people know those statistics or think of the nonprofit sector in this way. I think it flies under the radar. It's taken for granted. And in this moment that we are in, that is very risky indeed. So I think that we have a sector that is pointing us in the direction of a civil society.
So just based on what you just said and the importance of nonprofits, what has been the immediate impact of budgets and policy decisions made by the Trump administration concerning nonprofits?
So I would look at both the sort of tactical and the intangible. So the Trump administration has targeted the nonprofit sector in a way that makes my head spin. Abuse of tax-exempt status, targeting advocacy groups he believes are not aligned with his own positions. There are nonprofits reeling from catastrophic loss of federal funding, and the kind of impact that these cuts have had I believe, are impacting lives, right? You think about USAID. You think about so many places where federal funding has been taken away, and I think that real people will die on his watch.
Yeah.
The intangible is fear that advocacy organizations, whether particularly organizations that advocate for marginalized communities, right? People of color, immigrants, the unhoused, LGBT folks, they are living in a new world where they are in the crosshairs. And like many of these organizations, Erik, have sadly backed off visible commitments to diversity. And in what I have found particularly terrifying, many have removed their staff and board members' names from their websites for one simple reason, which is personal safety. And when you think about what I just said in my State of the Union address, right, and you think about this, not only does it not make any sense, but it is sucking the humanity out of the world we live in. The work that's being done risks so many of the things that make us human, and pits us against each other, causes us to live in some real fear, and we are not having the ability to help our neighbors the way the nonprofit sector was built to do.
Yeah. And you touched on one of the things, because they're talking about, like in the tax code, about changing the definition of the exempt status.
Yes.
Weaponizing the IRS actually to go after nonprofits and all that kind of stuff. I think that, in the overall scheme of what he's doing, what Stephen Miller and all these other guys are trying to do is to try to centralize power. And I think to target nonprofits, the ones that you don't like, because, there's nonprofits out there that support what the president's doing.
Yes.
And, but the overall impact of all of that stuff is going to all the numbers that you just stated. I just think that meddling with the tax code, if you want to meddle with the tax code from a politician's perspective, I say let's get rid of the exemptions for wealthy people. Let's simplify the language. Let's have one form that everybody can fill out instead of 18 different ones. Stuff like that. But when you're messing with people who are trying to fulfill, as you say, in your faith tradition and my faith tradition, to help others, and to repair the world, I think those are the folks that you need to not mess with. I think those are the folks you need to protect. But
and it's no question that, when I work, I'm an executive coach for CEOs. I also run a membership site for board and staff leaders of small nonprofits, $1 million or less, and about 70% of nonprofits have budgets under $1 million, right? And so they're small, and they're going to get all wound up in the IRS coming after them for audits, and it's going to take them off their game. What's the object of the game? The object of the game is to help people. And if they're all wound up in doing audits, and, small organizations are not always staffed well to be neat and tidy and shiny. They're a little messy, and I just think it's just going to divert them from the tasks at hand.
Yeah. The 990 forms are hard enough as they is. You don't need to add any more drama to it. What are the challenges facing nonprofits post-COVID?
Another really interesting question, because I think that Michael Hyatt has this saying that says you have to look at what challenging times make possible. And I think that during COVID, nonprofits were they were compelled to abandon business as usual. And frankly, business as usual wasn't everything it was cracked up to be. So many clients who were disproportionately reliant on gala revenue when it went out the window, right? And they had to try different things. They had to take some chances, pilot some new things. And I think that ultimately, that was very good for the sector and for staff leaders to be thinking that way. I had hoped that it would stick after COVID and that we'd see more of that stay there. I think that boards of directors tend to be risk averse, and they wanted to get back to business as usual. And I think that has hampered us as we have moved into this new administration, because we need to continue to do that. I think that the sector needs to be innovative, needs to try new things, and that boards need to think of their jobs as more expansive and not just as a group of people to make sure that nothing goes wrong. Because, by the way, on January 20th of this year, a lot of things went wrong. And it was out of the board's hands and out of the staff's hands. And it's what you do in these moments of adversity that demonstrate real leadership. And I think we should be looking at, organizations should be looking at scenario planning. They should be looking at diversifying their revenue streams. They should be all of the things they should have been doing all along. They should be looking at their programs and saying, should I do a couple fewer programs, but do them deeper? Right? Should I merge with another organization? Right? Should I become a program of another organization? Would it make sense for us to acquire this organization? I think we can, honestly. This is a really dark time. But as Eleanor Roosevelt says, I'd rather light one candle than curse the darkness. And I think there's some opportunity here as I did with COVID, for the nonprofit sector to strengthen itself as a result of this adversity.
Let me ask you this question. This is kind of off of the cuff real quick, but
sure.
We were talking about diversifying. A lot of the nonprofits, when they work and try to get grants and stuff, we're always told, well, you need to have some board members that's writing, individually writing checks and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And some of the nonprofits that you talked about that you work with that are $1 million or less, they don't really have those kind of people. They have people that really want to do the work and really feel a need for that to happen, but they're not necessarily people that could write big checks. It's like, if you can get one or two on the board, that's great. But most of the time you can't. So how do you navigate with folks that have that dilemma that it's like, well, we got to get some people to write checks so we can get grant?
Well, I don't know that that's what funders what they're looking for. They're looking for, and so I don't want to speak for all foundations, but I have a philosophy about boards and fundraising, which is that I actually think of board members as the most credible storytellers in your organization, and that we do not do enough of building a culture of storytelling in our organization, so that you, Erik, as a board member, are as credible a messenger in telling a really amazing story about the work of the organization I run as I am. And that your job as a board member is to be armed with a couple of really great stories and to invite as many people to come closer to the work as possible. Now, whether you close the deal, whether you give the dollars, or whether I do, doesn't matter. I think what we're trying to do is build sort of a, if you will, sort of an army of the engaged. The more people who know about your organization, the more people who come closer, the more money you're going to raise. I mean, think about volunteers. Volunteers are the bottom of that fundraising pyramid. They are disproportionately likely to give money than almost any other group within a nonprofit organization. So I think I would rather be able to go to a funder and say that I, as a staff leader, had started a stewardship program and that everybody on my board was to cultivate a relationship with 3 prospective or current donors. And at the end of the year, because of that relationship, they either renewed or upgraded those donors. So it's not just about whether you can give. And in fact, I don't think it's always about how much you give. It's about how vocal and visible an ambassador are you? How much of a relationship builder are you? And can bring lots more people closer to the organization. And I'd rather be measured by that as a board of directors than whether or not I have 6 or 7 people who can write big fat checks. Because if I have that, I am probably lacking in community leaders, people with lived experience in the field, an academic, a PR person, a digital marketing person, right? If I gauge who should be on my board simply by who can write a big fat check, I think I'm in trouble.
Yeah. So one guest kind of started this tradition, and I've been keeping it going. And that's when somebody makes a point that's really strong, I usually say that louder so the people in the back can hear it, right? I think that's one of those points that you just made.
Yeah. I mean,
Is there a segment of the American population or a particular issue that you would like to see more nonprofit activity occur in?
Well, I don't know that if I would like to see more activity, but I feel like those issues that have been targeted by our current administration need all hands on deck. And I think that they are in a place where they're going to be vulnerable and struggling. And so I would like to see more people engage as volunteers and donors, particularly in advocacy organizations for marginalized communities. Because, as will not surprise you, I don't think, Erik, if I am an organization that is advocating for immigrants, my staff has quite a number of people who have that lived experience. That means there's a lot of trauma on my staff and that there's a lot of just trauma in the organization writ large. And so I think I would like to see a deeper investment in those organizations that are going to be most in the crosshairs. And I think we could probably list them right now, but I would say those that are really advocating for marginalized communities, whether that's an advocacy organization or, I had a client who works at the intersection of the disability community, the deaf community, and the criminal justice community. She lost 70% of her funding overnight, right? These folks, we need to be out there working for them and with them to make sure they can continue to do their work and that we don't risk actually losing them altogether.
Yeah. All right. So let me close out with this question.
Go.
What advice would you give someone who wants to start a nonprofit organization in this moment in time?
I think the advice that I would give them is not drastically different from advice I might have given them 5 years ago. And I think the first thing I would say is that if you want to start a nonprofit, you need to do your homework. Just because you have a good idea doesn't mean it should become an organization. Is the work being done elsewhere? Could your idea be a program at an existing organization? There might be 1.9 million nonprofits, but maybe there's duplication we could really be avoiding. And therefore, less money going towards overhead for multiple organizations, deeper overhead investment in fewer organizations and in programs. The second piece of advice I would give is what I would say, build a very passionate posse of people. One of the biggest problems I see with founders who start nonprofits is they get their brother, sister, next door neighbor to be one of the 3 names on the 501c3 app as their board. And they end up staying on their board. And I would say, before you fill out that 501c3 app, pull together a really interesting, diverse group of people with both skills and lived experience and brainstorm and plan, fine-tune this mission and the work that you will do that will make it unique and distinctive, and then fill out your 501c3 app. Don't start that after you get the status. And then the third one I would say, and I used to say it all the time, is fasten your seatbelt. Now I would say fasten your seatbelt a lot tighter.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause we're in interesting times. And so, but a lot of what you just said, it has been a practical approach for many years in dealing with this work. So, Joan Garry, I'm really, really glad that you have brought this passion to the nonprofit sector, to be a coach, to be a guide for folks to succeed in it.
I'm glad too. I get as much as I give, Erik.
Well, and that's good to know. I was telling somebody that I was going to have you on the show, and they were like really, really excited. And so,
oh, good. Can I get their name and address?
Yeah. I'll get it to you. But they said they'd seen you speak before. They hadn't formally met you, but they were really, really excited. And so, I understand why. So I greatly appreciate you taking the time. How can people get in touch with you? How can people get in touch with the organization?
Oh, thank you. So pretty much all things Joan at joangarry.com, and it's GARRY.com, and our membership site, which is 6,000 strong board and staff leaders from around the world in content, getting content as well as moral support and community, you can find at nonprofitleadershiplab.com.
All right. Well, Joan, thank you so much for coming on again. And I greatly appreciate your time.
My pleasure. And thank you for asking me and for your work and bringing some really interesting voices into the ether.
Yes, ma'am. All right, guys. And we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right. And we are back. So I want to thank Mikel Bolden, Renee Williams, and Joan Garry for coming on the show. Like I always say, man, and I know y'all probably think it's cliche and I'm just being deferential and all that stuff, but you just don't know the joy I have in being able to talk to these incredible human beings that are out here doing the work and to get to converse with them a little bit, either prior to the interview or afterwards or whatever. And no matter how dynamic they are, how humble these people really are. Right. And that's one of the attributes that we are so lacking. Right. In our current political discourse is the humility. It's understanding the gravity of what's being done, but don't, let the moment get too big where where they allow their confidence and their skill set to shine and still do the work. But, these are not flashy people. These are not people trying to be the loudest person in the room, but they do what needs to be done. And so I just want to thank those ladies for coming on again. And we ask, always I ask that people support the work that they're doing and get involved, whether it's politically, financially, or through volunteers, right? Just get engaged, get involved, right? So again, thank y'all ladies for coming on. Now, I want to finish a thought that I was kind of going into, I guess. Last week I was talking about something and then I started reading a little bit and I said, well, no, maybe I'm not going to go in that direction. It's not exactly the message I want to give. But I do want to say this real quick. And for those folks who, they're like, well, Erik, you come from a certain political bent, so naturally you're going to have this kind of take and all that. And there's some truth in that, right? But I think it is fair to say that where we are right now is that we are trying to navigate around insanity. And there are some people who are trying to normalize insanity. And when I say insanity, I'm not necessarily talking about clinical, because I'm not a psychologist, right? I let my good friends like Renee Carr and others do that. Mary Trump, all those folks. I let them do the psychological stuff. I'm just a common sense kind of person. And I think in this day and age, with all that we're exposed to, how we're all connected, right? We just celebrated yet another new iPhone coming out, right? Where you can shoot movies and you can talk to people all over the globe and you can download the internet and record speeds and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like going, we have all this technology. We have all these ways of interacting. Our cultures are so intermeshed. So when I say insanity, it's like to be racist in America is insane, right? And, I can't force people to be around me you can't force people to be around me. Meaning, you can't tell me I got to be in this setting or you got to accept me in this setting, right? I understand there's nuanced things where the culture kind of kicks in. But to try to build a political party in this day and age based on keeping everything separate and this false notion that one particular race is greater than every other race, and then to deny the contributions of all of the cultures that exist in the United States and just say that one culture did it all. You know, in layman's terms, you can say that's ignorant, but ignorance for no reason is insanity, right? Because there's no reason for you to not know about the contributions of Black folks. There's no reason not to know the contributions of Asian Americans. There's no reason not to know the contributions of Hispanic Americans, right? None. Native Americans, the indigenous people, none. There's no reason why you can't have access to that information now, other than certain folks want to limit your access. So you want to accept trophies from somebody who's created a device and upgraded a device that the whole world can connect to, but you want to limit what information they can get on that device. That's insanity. And to use your political capital to do that, right? I just don't understand why you would do that. I don't understand what the advantage is, and I don't understand why so many Americans believe that's okay. And when I say so many, I know that not everybody that voted for our current president thinks that way, but enough of y'all do. And that's too many. It's like you have enough of a subculture where you can have your own networks. You can have your own podcasts. You can have your own movies and songs. By the way, there's literally a song about lynching people that's out. And a couple of songs about sundown towns and all that kind of stuff, right? That's too many people. That's too many. And our challenge in being optimistic but being pragmatic about it is to navigate around that, right? But we have an obligation to make sure that people understand that that is not normal. There's no way in any shape or form that is normal. And it doesn't matter how many threats, what kind of political power is exerted, no matter how many fiery speeches and memorial services are given. The way these folks think is not normal. It's not healthy. It's not productive. But right now, they control the House, the Senate, the White House, and basically the Supreme Court at the federal level. So we just got to fight against that. And, they want us to fight violently. They want us to get weapons and go out in the streets and tear up stuff and all that stuff so they can have an excuse to shut everything down. But we're proving that we're smarter than that. So we're going to fight the way that we've been fighting, the way we were taught to fight, nonviolently. We'll speak with our dollar bills. We'll speak with our voices. We'll speak with our writings and our podcasts and, just everything that we can do. Because the bottom line is we have to resist. We have to. We have no choice. Sane people have no choice but to resist what's happening. And for those who are not morally strong enough or intelligent enough or courageous enough not to be sheep in that insane flock, we just have to work around those people. If we can save some, or we can convert some back to sanity, bring them back to sanity, so be it. If we can. But a lot of those people are going to have to make that decision on their own. And we got to get out of this notion in America that, instant is good or that instant is even realistic, right? The damage that has been done in 8 months is going to take years to fix, right? Let me say that again. The damage has been done in 8 months. It's going to take years to fix. So whoever is brought in to replace this current government, you're going to have some patience with that. Now, there may be some instant things like prices might go down, right? Wages may go up. Jobs may be plentiful. But as far as trust in institutions, as far as stability in government, as far as prioritizing budgets, it's going to take some time because you got to really purge the insanity out. And I know a lot of people, especially of younger generations, when they hear purge, they think of the movie and think, oh, we're about to kill people. No, that's not how we do that. But you got to separate the wheat from the chaff. You got to get the quality in so the insanity can come out. It's just that simple. And, if we want this nation to thrive and all of us to be a part of it, then we've got to resist what's happening and we've got to continue to battle. Now, there are people who are contrarian, right? They'll come across to some of us as resistors, but they're always going to challenge authority regardless. Doesn't matter if authority is benevolent or authority is malevolent, right? They're going to challenge it. So you have to be wary of those folks, right? Because that's how they make their bread. That's how they sustain themselves. That's how they define their relevance. They're just contrary to anybody that's in authority. And if you want to live your life that way, that's fine. But you're not part of the resistance. See, the resistance is here to set up so that we can move the people out that are hurting us and put people in that will help us. So we want to respect authority. We want to respect people and promote people in leadership. We want to do that. We do not want to be in anarchy, but we also don't want to be under a strong-arm dictator, right? We want democracy, this democratic republic that, was set up. We want that to work. And it seems like whenever it starts benefiting everybody, that's when this insane group shows up and says, no, this is just for white folks. Now, true, it was nothing but white folks in the room in the hot boarded up building called Independence Hall, right? When they came up with their Declaration of Independence in 1776 and then in 1789, the Constitution. Nonetheless, over time, over these 249 years, everybody that falls under the category of citizen of the United States has all these benefits. And those people who are not citizens who happen to be on American soil actually have some benefits of their own, right? That some folks that are insane don't quite get. It's right there in black and white. You don't need somebody in a black robe. You can read that. It's right there. So I just want us to get to a point. And again, like I was telling some people last night, I don't want y'all to be a junkie or, like me, but I just want you to be engaged. I just want you to pay attention to what's happening. And if you know that it's not right, fight against it in whatever way you want to. I haven't been to Target. Oh my God. It is a Target literally right around the corner from where I stay. It is real easy for me to run in and run out. But I've made my decision, right? Other people have made their decision about Disney subscriptions and whatever else, right? Do what you can. Do what you need to do. Do what you have the luxury to do, even, right? but fight. If your best way to fight is to contribute to people, do that. If your best way to fight is to volunteer, do that. If your best way to fight is to write on Substack or Medium or WordPress, knock yourself out. If you want to do a podcast, do a podcast. All I'm saying is fight. All I'm saying is resist. Because you know in your heart what you seeing every day on the news. Some of you have gotten to the point you don't want to watch the news. But the thing that has upset you, the thing that has got you feeling some kind of way, you know it's not right. But what I want you to understand is that you have the power to challenge that. What they want you to do is think that they want you to be hopeless. They want you to feel that you're powerless. They want you to feel like they're inevitable. And they're not. They're not. At any moment, it could be over. And so what I need you to do is to be steadfast, to be immovable, to resist. And if you do that, and we get others to follow suit, then they'll understand. And either they will change their stripes or they will be pushed aside. That's just how that works. Because in order for us to live in a society that's cool, a society that's balanced, a society that's filled with opportunities, we got to get people out of the way that want to stop all that. It's just that simple. And the way we do that is through the electing process, through the judicial process, through civil disobedience and education. Because the more educated you are, the more you can see what's happening and the more you realize this is crazy. And you're just not going to tolerate it. A lot of you, even if you don't quite get all of the dynamics, you feel it in your soul. Something ain't right. Young people who are not versed in political efficacy and all that, they feel it. And that's why they're doing all these other outlets, right? Or they want to escape. The one thing we don't want to take away from any human being, let alone young people, is hope. So let me close out by saying, guys, we can do this. We can get through this. And we will come out on the other side better than we were before. But we got to commit to fight. We cannot submit. We cannot acquiesce. We cannot surrender. We cannot do what Stephen A. Smith said. Just go along to get along. We can't do that. We can't. He wouldn't be in the spot he was in if black folks had that mindset 60 years ago. Wouldn't have happened. We are not in a position of comfort. Coretta Scott King basically told us we got to fight for freedom every day. So let's do that. If freedom is what you want, if sanity is what you're trying to achieve, if order is what you want, fight for it. Thank y'all for listening. Until next time.
NBG Podcast Network.